I have been such a big fan of the Dark Souls series. Well, it was more of a love-hate relationship toward the start, admittedly. I remember I tried to pick up and play Dark Souls 1 a few years back because I always loved a good challenge, but I got so frustrated with what I thought was the natural progression of the game when I arrived at Firelink Shrine for the first time and then headed in the direction the game clearly goads you towards. I'm sure you can guess what happened after that point. Skeletons wrecked me, I gave up, and I never wanted to play the game again. But then around some time, the Game Grumps started playing Dark Souls 3, and it looked like such a better time, so I picked it up. I love Dark Souls 3 so much, and I've beaten it over and over. I even got fired up enough to go back and play Dark Souls 1 on the Switch when the remaster released, and I actually beat it this past week in anticipation for today's topic of discussion. So pretty much what I'm trying to say is that I like to think I've taken my inaugural lashings when it comes to the Souls series. I know what to expect when Dark Souls or punishing but fair game design is the topic of discussion, and how rewarding these games can actually feel to overcome. That's why I was so freaking excited when I saw the next project that Miyazaki and his team were working on was set in a feudal war-torn Japan. Now, some of you may not be aware, but From Software actually had their hand in making some stealth-focused ninja games before they started working on the Souls games. The Tenchu series was a rather popular series on the original PlayStation, and also saw success through the Xbox 360 era through From Software. The license for Tenchu has been sold and acquired a few times before being found by From Software. But I have personally enjoyed the games I've played from their Tenchu era. That only includes Tenchu Z, but I know Nick has been playing the original game since he was a kid and loves them dearly. And I know I've heard the subtitle Wrath of Heaven thrown around a lot. And it came as no surprise to me that Sekiro was actually planned to be a brand new Tenchu game. I'm not sure why it was changed, but if I had to make a guess, it seems to stray away from the original game's formula too much. So they probably stuck with something original as to not confuse longtime fans or any outsiders looking in. But now that Sekiro is here and Nioh disappointed me so, let's see how Miyazaki's next adventure really is. So to begin, I think this game is honestly amazing. I've had my ups and downs with it, but I can say with certainty now that the highs far outweighed the lows for me. Seeing as how I just described my roller coaster of a relationship with Dark Souls 1, I had a very determined mindset going into Sekiro. So I knew that I was going to beat it, and I knew I was going to get kicked to the curb more times than I would want to. And it definitely did just that. And sometimes for all the wrong reasons. But we'll talk about that a little bit later on. The opening moments of the game do a good job of not overloading the player with mechanics, but still keeping things moving. One of the first things I had to realize early on is that this game is only related to Dark Souls by developer and a few passing design holdovers. The more methodical and strategic combat of the Souls series is replaced by an extremely high-octane and sometimes frantic balance of choices and options. And the biggest and most interesting hurdle to climb over in Sekiro is the posture system. When fighting, you have this little meter up here that will slowly become wider and wider depending on how many attacks you block, deflect, or just take in the face. When this meter is spread to its edges, you are left wide open and helpless for a short time. But it can be just enough time for the enemy to take your life. Inversely, however, the enemy also has a posture meter. So it is your job through a number of different methods to literally break down your opponents. Because this is the way the game wants you to win battles. When you break your enemy's posture, they are left open for what's known as a death blow. Basically, this means they're killed instantly with a signature Japanese high-pressured fountain of blood and viscera. But one thing that I didn't learn until much later on is that the lower you or your enemy's health is, the slower the posture gauge will regenerate for either of you. So battles should always follow a bit of a flexible formula. Start by trying to knock off as much health as you can so their posture's slow to recover, and then parry all the heavy hitting attacks and take advantage of every counter opportunity until their posture breaks. This might sound like a bit of a monotonous exchange, and while I would have to agree with you for a number of the encounters, it's definitely not the case for all the bosses. There are quite a few bosses that are actually really fun, creatively surprising, extremely fast-paced, and yes, very challenging. In fact, the bosses are where I have the most amount of conflicting criticisms, so let's tackle that. So there are lots of large and imposing enemies to take down in this game. I mean, come on, it's a From Software game after all. They've arguably created some of the most memorable bosses in gaming history. Ornstein and Smaug, the Bell Gargoyles, the Nameless King, just to say a few. And Sekiro definitely has some extremely memorable encounters too, and I will not soon forget the likes of a select few. But I really can't shake the feeling that development was crunched in some areas of this game. Most notably for me, the bosses, and especially the mini-bosses. So I explained the way that the game seems to expect you to take on boss encounters with the posture system. But not every boss adheres to this, which makes for an extremely wishy-washy difficulty, with a few mountain-sized spikes peppered in throughout the adventure. The worst offender in my opinion is this guy, the Corrupted Monk. He is humongous and has an incredible amount of posture. So I did what I thought was best up until this point. I did my best to whittle down his health until I had the upper hand and could break his posture. Problem is, his attack damaged me more through a deflection than I could damage him with a direct hit. But this particular problem isn't unique to just this boss. The Corrupted Monk is merely the melting pot for all this game's most antiquated and misguided boss encounters. The camera is one of the most aggravating things in this game, and it just adds further fuel to the lack of cohesion in the bosses. There are times when the lock-on camera is still trying to fixate on your target, but due to some of the bosses having very mobile movesets, it'll go nuts when they end up pushing you into a wall. Then, because you can't see, you have no idea how to react to their moves and end up with an extremely unjustified death. But the thing is that most of these problems could be mitigated if they'd just given these enemies bigger arenas in which you face them. Oh wait, they do, but on different occasions! Because this game loves to reuse existing assets, especially for mini-bosses. The kicky flippy guy is fought in this mine shaft, which is way too small for his Bruce Lee ass. And then, you fight the same moveset in several places around the game. The Chained Ogre is fought at the beginning of the game in a good area with a good bit of space, but then you fight him again in the smallest room ever and it's impossible for the camera to not have a panic attack. This big fat sword guy has 3 separate boss fights with health bars and all, and there's so many more examples unfortunately. And I know Dark Souls 1 has a horrible habit of it too, but that doesn't give Sekiro an excuse. But I'm a little baffled as to how they decided on some of these bosses as is, like the multitude of optional headless mini-bosses you'll find throughout the world. They're these really creepy things with a big sword, no head, and the most annoying gimmick in this game. They take away your ability to be a ninja. They emit this fog that for some reason takes away your ability to sprint and jump as high as you usually can. I've only bothered to kill 2 of these things, and I think I encountered around 6 in total. And the only reason I even killed those 2 is because you fight them underwater. And on a quick side note, this game has really great swimming controls. I actually got excited when I saw deep pools of water. But all of the headless bosses seem like they were built with a very mobile character in mind, but this fog takes it away from you. But when underwater, you have all these things and the can affect you. So these are the only 2 occasions where you're allowed to somewhat take advantage of this. And their sword swings do damage even when deflected, so it's the same problems I mentioned before with the Corrupted Monk. You can't give enough damage to make a dent before he inevitably finishes you off even if you block all of his moves perfectly. So I'm not really ashamed to say that I cheesed a few of these bosses. Because when the game gives me a free pass, sorry not sorry, I'm going to cash that sucker in. If it wasn't finding a specific situation that outright breaks their attack programming, it was just using the mobility to your advantage. This game pushed me to learn new things and try some honestly cheap tactics. Sometimes it worked, and sometimes these tactics were still difficult to execute. But at least I beat the ghosty boy through my patented cheesy means. Now I can finally see what's next in the game. Oh, this area looks promising. No! I had lost so many times to the ghost monk that I gave up and tried to progress in a different direction before eventually returning to beat him. And this is where my favorite aspect of the game comes into play: the exploration. This world that has been created and laid out in front of you in Sekiro is honestly my favorite that From Software has ever made. From the rooftops of Japanese castles, dank and disturbed forests, iced over mountainsides and lush cliff tops, every area is just begging you to check out every little crevice and pushing your curiosity to its limits. Playing as the so-called one-armed wolf, or Sekiro, you are fitted with a prosthetic arm that doubles as many tools, but most notably a freaking grappling hook! Oh my god, if you want your game to be great, just add a grappling hook and you're on your way, baby! This thing allows you to really feel like you're traversing these environments that you're not supposed to. Using the tree branches to swing yourself across distances you wouldn't have been able to, or save yourself from a drop by grabbing an anchor point, is a lot of fun. And you're always getting new tools, abilities, and items that allow you to access parts of the world that you thought were unreachable. But if I can criticize exploration just a smidge real quick, I think that the game can be a little too cryptic with how some of these secret areas are reached. To be completely fair, the ones that are a bit of a mystery aren't mandatory for completion, but I just wish it would have been laid out a little bit more clearly. The one that comes to mind is this kite on the side of Mount Sinpu. You can let the kite out further so you know that it's important for some reason, but you're not entirely sure why. I know I racked my head thinking about how it could be. Turns out that you're supposed to use this inconspicuous combat ability that allows you to turn someone into a crazed puppet that does nothing but attack everyone, including you. But in this situation, for some reason, this little guy just starts flying the kite. You can then go up higher to the mountain and use it to swing over to the new area, but it still felt like a bit more cryptic than it needed to be. And more often than not, I found myself sort of disappointed by the items I found lying around these special hidey holes on the map. Like when I go through all the trouble of beating a group of enemies and using all of my Estus gourd just to be rewarded by something that gives me a coin purse or a small temporary defense boost, I can't help but feel a little disincentivized to waste my time like that again. Of course I'm going to grab the shiny items just out of principle, that's what kind of player I am after all. But I think the game kind of subverts expectations when it does that kind of thing, which can really bum some players out if you're not careful. But you still do find plenty of great treasures on your journey that have great effect on how you approach situations. And if there's one thing I think the exploration in Sekiro plays exceptionally well into, it's giving the players option for approaching any kind of encounter. Seeing as how the game was originally going to be another Tenchu game and likely would have focused on stealth gameplay above all else, it's no surprise that stealth is heavily embedded into the DNA as is. In Tenchu games, you have the ability to sneak behind unsuspecting enemies and deal an instant kill move. This operates nearly identically in here. Being a big fan of stealth games of most all kinds and then hopping right on Sekiro, I felt quite at home. You can leap from high ledges onto unsuspecting foes, grab them from around a corner, and many other sneaky techniques. And not to mention all the other tools that add to your options. The first area of the game already showed promise of letting me tackle these problems and situations the way that I want to tackle them. This mindset will follow you to most places in the game. If there's a boss that's giving you trouble or has too many henchmen that interfere with the duels you're trying to have, there's often a way to take care of these henchmen. Or even sneak up to the boss and instantly shave off a health bar. But you do have to keep an eye out for these hidden alternative routes. Even if there are still those few bosses I mentioned earlier that still bog down these encounters as a whole. But I suppose it's time to talk about the enemy AI in Sekiro. These enemies are extremely aggressive when engaged in combat. Most are very good with keeping the pressure on and never letting up, save for a few slip seconds to recover their own lost posture. They serve as great mob enemies and are good at chipping your health down and making the trek to the next sculptor's idol more intense. Even if they put some way too close together, but... There are some guys that you know are pushovers, some you should take down first if given the chance, and some that are the most annoying thing ever. but this is all when the enemy is aware of your presence. The game's stealth mechanics don't strike me as quite so stable. The enemies are sometimes very vigilant to their comrades getting gutted in front of them and will immediately hear them, but other times they're as deaf as my grandpa. But then they all seem to possess the sight of a hawk and can see me from a mile away and never ever lose track of me. That goes double for mini bosses. While that health bar is up there, they know your exact location. No exceptions. But this is where items come in. If you use the Gaichin sugar, which makes you more difficult to detect, you might as well not be there. Unless they've already seen you. Then there is no way to break their line of sight, even when hiding on rooftops where you can clearly not see me. Stop cheating! But that's just another way some of these items are broken and at the same time useless. Take this example, the ceramic shard. I thought that it would have been a diversion item, right? You throw it somewhere, it makes a noise for one of the guards in the pack to go check it out. Nope. You throw it at an enemy from cover and they walk towards the direction it was thrown from. Because they know that? Like this guy. I threw one over in the opposite direction and he starts walking toward me. Seriously, if you're on patrol and you hear something shatter, you're not gonna go inspect the area facing away from it. That's so stupid. Oh, and it really sucks me out of the game when I'm in the middle of a boss fight and I run away for a second to catch my posture, maybe drink some gore juice, when all of a sudden their health bar disappears. And I run back to find that all the damage was reset while I still have all my health down and supplies gone. It's still very satisfying when you finally take these guys down, but it's just frustrating to me to no end when I have to restart for playing how I think a ninja would play. And this wouldn't be a problem if death wasn't so gut-punchingly crude in this game. Along your journey, you will find lots of lovely and some strange NPCs who have lots of tasks for you to complete. It really makes this world come to life, and it feels like it's still a living place, in contrast to Dark Souls' frozen over apocalyptic civilizations. It's a cool change of pace, but when you die in Sekiro, you're met with a choice. Do you embrace the grave and lose half of your money and experience with no means to get them back? Or do you resurrect and attempt to finish the fight you're in, or try to scurry back to an idol to regroup and restock? Sounds like a no-brainer, right? Of course you want to resurrect and save all of your cash and hard-earned XP. But there is a catch. Due to the undying blood in your veins, the more you die again after being resurrected, the larger the chance the NPCs in your game will be infected with dragon rot. This is a deathly disease that doesn't actually kill people for some reason, but instead makes them too sick to talk to you or let you finish their side quests. The only way to reverse it is to use a special item called a dragon blood droplet that cures everyone's dragon rot. And this is honestly confusing to me. Why leave something like this up to chance? Like, it's a From Software game, so I know I'm going to die a lot, but why am I being punished here for wanting to repeatedly get back up and try again? If they're asking me to get better at the game, I was already planning on doing that. I want to keep fighting this boss so I can learn and master its patterns and eventually overcome it. But by giving me more strict consequences in the form of locking away the side quests, it seems like you're almost goaded away from continuously fighting bosses. And I could see that if they wanted me to go get stronger, but they locked away the NPCs that give me stuff to do to get stronger. And oh my gosh, the dragon rot system just really doesn't feel very well thought out to me. Maybe they just wanted to try something other than going and grabbing your experience from where you died. Maybe even more so since they know Team Ninja used it too. But with the increased moveset, that system makes more sense than ever, I think. I don't know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if you have to, make it something that's a little less intrusive. Like make them lose some consumable items or make it double down on the loss of experience and money. Don't put a roadblock in. But I will say that Sekiro has made quite the identity for itself above all else. Some of the set pieces in the game were really tense and fun. The snake was awesome. Seeing his shedded skin on the Ashina cliffside was so cool and foreboding, and your first encounter with him was pretty cool too. I actually got scared when I was playing right here. Like, it legit got me like a jump scare in a scary movie. Even though the snake kind of had an anticlimactic ending to me, it was still really cool. And good lord, this game looks and runs superbly. I was playing it on PC with max settings and recording the whole time, and I only had a dip in frames around Ashina Castle. Only a very small blemish on an otherwise very pretty game. But now the question comes, can I recommend this game to you? Are you easily agitated with games? If you are, then no, absolutely not. This is probably the steepest and most unforgiving learning curve I've ever had to learn in a video game. I have been trying to get my big brother and cousin Jake into the Dark Souls series for a very long time, and I think the best place to start with that franchise is Dark Souls 3. It's a very tough game, but I think the most well-rounded and consistently fun experience. You have a lot to learn with it, but the rewards and sense of accomplishment are great. And I think even the average gamer can overcome that game with enough determination. I wouldn't even bring up the subject of this game to either one of them. I like to think I have a very high tolerance for bullshit in video games. I can recognize when it's there, but I usually just trudge through it to see if it gets better. And Sekiro has made me scream, yell, slam my fists on my desk, hurt my wrist from holding the block button so hard. I broke a plastic cup, I gave up multiple times, and I feel like an absolute god when I finally overcome the boss that gave me so much trouble. Sure, those extra moves, permanent health increases, and progression of the plot are all really nice, but the sense of accomplishment is what I really think you're playing the game for. The swell of emotions that envelop you in some of these fights are quite honestly insane. When I finally beat the final boss, my heart was actually beating extremely fast. I thought the AED in my chest was going to give me a corrective shock for sure. But the overwhelming pat on the back and good job this game gives you was honestly unlike any other game I've played. The combat has so many layers, and you just uncover more and more the deeper you dive into it all. There's definitely some rough around quite a few of these edges, but I think it's a great time and worth the journey if you're up to the challenge it presents. Here's to Sekiro: Shadows Die 3 Times. But anyway, I appreciate you for watching, so thanks for stopping by and have a great day.